Imagine you are standing on a high mountain. You look down and see a river. This is not just any river. This is the Yellow River, and it has been flowing for thousands of years. This river is the start of one of the longest stories in human history. It is the story of China. Most countries we know today are quite young. They are like teenagers in the history of the world. But China? China is like a very old, very wise, and sometimes very complicated grandparent. This story has everything: great heroes, scary villains, amazing inventions, and a lot of changes. So, let's travel back in time. About 5,000 years ago, people started living in small villages along the Yellow River. They learned how to grow grain and keep animals. But there was a problem. The river flooded a lot. It would destroy everything. The legends say a man named Yu the Great worked for 13 years to stop the floods. He didn't go home once, even when he walked past his own front door. Because he worked so hard, he became the first king of the Xia dynasty. Now, historians aren't 100% sure the Xia dynasty was real or just a story, but it represents the beginning of organized life in China. After the Xia came the Shang dynasty. This is where things get interesting. The Shang people were the first to use writing in China. They wrote on oracle bones, which were actually turtle shells or shoulder blades of cows. They would heat the bones until they cracked and then read the cracks to predict the future. They also became masters of bronze. They made beautiful pots and weapons. They believed their ancestors could help them from the afterworld, so they treated their family history with a lot of respect. This respect for family is something that still exists in China today. Then came the Zhou dynasty. They ruled for a very long time, about 800 years. The Zhou kings introduced a big idea called the Mandate of Heaven. They said that the gods chose the ruler because he was fair and good. But if the ruler became bad or lazy, the gods would send earthquakes or floods as a sign. Then someone else had the right to take over. This idea explained why dynasties changed over time. During the end of the Zhou period, China broke apart into many small states that fought each other. This was called the Warring States period. It sounds like a bad time, and it was, but it was also a time of great thinking. In the middle of all this fighting, a man named Confucius was born. He didn't want to fight. He wanted to find a way for people to live in peace. He taught that if everyone followed their role, children respecting parents and rulers being kind to their people, the world would be happy. Another thinker, Laozi, thought differently. He believed people should live simply and follow the way of nature. This is called Taoism. These ideas became the soul of Chinese culture. But while the thinkers were talking, one man was planning to win. His name was Qin Shi Huang. He was the leader of the Qin state. He was tough, some say he was mean, but he was very effective. In 221 BC, he defeated all the other states and did something nobody had ever done before. He united China. He called himself the first emperor. He wanted everything to be the same. He made everyone use the same money, the same weights for measuring food, and even the same way of writing. He started building a giant wall to keep out enemies from the north. You might have heard of it, the Great Wall of China. Qin Shi Huang was obsessed with living forever. He spent a lot of money looking for a magic potion. He didn't find it, but he built a massive tomb for himself. Inside, he put thousands of life-sized clay soldiers, each with a different face, to protect him in the afterlife. We call them the Terracotta Army. He died, and his dynasty didn't last long because he was very strict, but he gave China its name and its shape. After the Qin came the Han dynasty. If you ask a Chinese person today about their history, many will say they are Han. This was a golden age. The Han emperors kept the unity of the Qin, but were a bit kinder. They opened a famous trade route called the Silk Road. This was a path for camels and horses that went all the way from China to Rome. China sent silk, tea, and paper to the West. In return, they got new foods, horses, and a new religion from India called Buddhism. During the Han, the Chinese invented paper. Imagine that! Before paper, people wrote on heavy wood or expensive silk. Now, knowledge could travel fast, but like all stories, things go up and down. The Han dynasty eventually fell apart, and for a few hundred years, China was split into different pieces again. This is the time of the Three Kingdoms, which is full of famous stories about brave generals and clever spies. Eventually, China came back together. First under the Sui, who built the Grand Canal, a massive man-made river connecting the north and south. Then came the Tang dynasty. If the Han was a golden age, the Tang was a party. It was the most modern and open place in the world. People from all over the world, Persia, Japan, Korea, came to the capital city, Chang'an. Women had more freedom, poets wrote beautiful songs about the moon and wine, and the first female emperor, Wu Zetian, ruled with a firm hand. The Tang gave us woodblock printing, which meant books could be made much faster. After the Tang came the Song dynasty. The Song were very clever. They weren't as focused on war as they were on science and money. They were the first in the world to use paper money. They also perfected the compass for sailing and invented gunpowder. At first, they used gunpowder for fireworks, but soon they realized it could be used for weapons. The Song period was a time of big cities, busy markets, and great art. But they had a problem. To their north, a new power was growing. This power was the Mongols, led by the famous Genghis Khan. His grandson, Kublai Khan, eventually conquered all of China. This was the first time foreigners ruled the whole country. They called their rule the Yuan dynasty. This is when a traveler from Italy named Marco Polo came to China. He was amazed. He went back to Europe and told stories about cities that were much bigger than anything in Europe, and about people who burned black stones, coal, for heat. The Mongols were great at moving things around, so trade between East and West became very busy. But the Chinese people eventually wanted their own rulers back. A poor farmer led a rebellion and started the Ming dynasty. The Ming wanted to show the world how powerful China was. They built the Forbidden City in Beijing, a giant palace for the emperor with 9,999 rooms. They also sent a great sailor named Zheng He on massive ships across the ocean. His ships were many times bigger than the ones Christopher Columbus would use later. He traveled to Southeast Asia, India, and even Africa, bringing back giraffes and exotic treasures. But then the Ming decided to stop. They became worried about the outside world and closed their doors, focusing on finishing the Great Wall we see today. The last dynasty was the Qing dynasty. These rulers were from Manchuria in the north. They were very successful at first, making China bigger than it had ever been. But in the 1800s, things started to go wrong. While China was staying the same, Europe was going through the Industrial Revolution. They had steamships and better guns. Britain wanted to trade with China, but they didn't have anything the Chinese wanted, except for a drug called opium. This led to the Opium Wars. China lost, and they were forced to give away land, like Hong Kong, and pay a lot of money. This started what China calls the Century of Humiliation. By the early 1900s, people were angry. They felt the Qing emperors were too weak. In 1911, a revolution led by Sun Yat-sen ended the rule of emperors forever. China became a republic. But peace didn't come. Warlords fought for control. Two main groups emerged: the nationalists, led by Chiang Kai-shek, and the communists, led by Mao Zedong. They were busy fighting each other when Japan invaded in the 1930s. This was a terrible time of war and suffering. The nationalists and communists stopped fighting each other for a while to fight Japan. But as soon as World War II ended in 1945, they started their civil war again. In 1949, the communists won. Mao Zedong stood in Tiananmen Square and announced the birth of the People's Republic of China. The nationalists fled to the island of Taiwan. Mao wanted to change everything. He wanted to make China a strong industrial country quickly. Some of his plans, like the Great Leap Forward, were meant to help, but actually caused a lot of people to go hungry. Later, he started the Cultural Revolution, a very chaotic time when schools were closed and young people were encouraged to challenge authority. It was a time of great struggle, and many people suffered. When Mao died in 1976, China was poor and tired. A new leader named Deng Xiaoping took over. He was a practical man. He said, "It doesn't matter if a cat is black or white as long as it catches mice." This meant he didn't care as much about strict ideas. He wanted results. He opened China to the world. He allowed people to start their own businesses and invited foreign companies to build factories. This was the start of the economic miracle. Over the next 40 years, China changed faster than any country in history. Hundreds of millions of people moved from farms to giant new cities like Shenzhen and Shanghai. China became the factory of the world, making everything from your t-shirts to your smartphones. They built the world's longest high-speed rail network and started sending missions to the moon and Mars. Today, China is a global superpower. Under the leadership of Xi Jinping, China is focusing on being a leader in technology, like artificial intelligence and green energy. They have a plan called the Belt and Road Initiative, which is like a modern-day Silk Road, building roads and ports in countries all over the world. But modern China also faces challenges. The population is getting older, and there are big questions about how to balance the power of the government with the freedom of the people. The story of China is a story of a circle. It starts with a river and a small village. It grows into a giant empire, falls apart, and then pulls itself back together. It has been the richest country on earth, and it has been one of the poorest. It has been closed off, and it has been the center of world trade. When you look at China today, you aren't just looking at a modern country with neon lights and fast trains. You are looking at 5,000 years of memory. You are looking at the ghost of the first emperor, the wisdom of Confucius, the spirit of the Silk Road traders, and the hard work of millions of people who wanted a better life. The river is still flowing, and the story of China is still being written. Every time you see something made in China or you hear about a new tech breakthrough from Beijing, you are seeing a new chapter in the longest story on Earth. It is a story of survival, invention, and the incredible power of a people who never give up on their future, no matter how much the world changes. So, why does this matter to you? Because the world is more connected than ever. What happens in China affects the clothes you wear, the phone you use, and the air you breathe. Understanding China's past is the only way to understand our global future. From the first scratch on an oracle bone to the first code of a Chinese AI, this is a journey of thousands of miles that started with a single step. And that journey is far from over. As we look at the world today, we see a China that is both very old and very new. It is a place where you can find an ancient temple right next to a 100-story skyscraper. It is a place that remembers its history deeply, but is also rushing toward the future at full speed. Whether it's through the philosophy of balance or the drive for progress, China continues to shape the world just as it has for thousands of years. The story of China isn't just China's story anymore. It's a part of our shared human story. Think about the Great Wall. It was built to keep people out, but today, it is a place where people from every country on Earth come to meet. Think about the Silk Road. It started as a way to trade fabric, but it ended up trading ideas, religions, and cultures. China has always been a place where big things happen, sometimes good, sometimes difficult, but always on a scale that changes the world. As we move further into the 21st century, the relationship between China and the rest of the world will be the most important story of your generation. By knowing where they came from the Yellow River to the Forbidden City to the factories of Shenzhen, you can better understand where we are all going. The script of the future is being written right now, and China is holding one of the most powerful pens. So next time you see a map of the world, find China. Don't just see a large shape on a piece of paper. See the dynasties, the inventions, the revolutions, and the billions of individual stories that make up this epic history. It is a history that shows us that even when things fall apart, they can be built back stronger. It shows us that ideas can last for thousands of years. And most importantly, it shows us that the story of a nation is never really finished. It just keeps evolving, layer by layer, century by century, into the world we live in today. To wrap up this journey, remember that history isn't just about dates and names. It's about how people solve problems, how they deal with change, and how they dream of something better. China's history is a massive, colorful, and sometimes messy lesson in all of those things. It's a story of a civilization that refused to disappear, and in doing so, changed the course of human life forever. From the banks of the Yellow River to the edge of the universe, the story continues.